Hey, welcome back to Booth Basters. We are back on the air after a little bit of a break since Daniel had a show, which we will talk about tonight. We have opened it up to a bunch of our past friends, other bastards that have been involved in the show. So hopefully some of them will jump on tonight. So Daniel and I are going to kick it off because it is early, and we'll start talking about the beginning of our season. So without much further ado, my partner on this show, Daniel M. Davis of Steam Crow.
Hello, everyone, and welcome. And I'm being introduced by Jason T. Rodgers, and the T stands for Tiger, I heard. Is that true?
Sure. Yeah. It's actually, that would be less strange, actually.
Really?
Yeah. The T stands for Tobin.
Wow, Tobin's pretty good. I had a character named Tobin once.
Did you? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Which is cool. You know, I don't mind the kind of Shakespearean reference there. So, but I don't really know a lot about the origin of that. So I'm not embarrassed by my middle name. That's one thing I'm thankful for. There's a lot of people who, you know, are like embarrassed or, oh my God, your middle name's Tobin. And it's like, yeah, whatever. Never really affected me. The Jason T was I had an art teacher in junior high school who loved my middle initial. So we had, you know, it was junior high school. We all had drawers. Assigned drawers in art class, and you'd have it was Miss Green, which is like the only teacher I can remember a name from early childhood. Your drawer had your name, like she'd write it on masking tape or whatever and stick it on your drawer. And I came in the first day of the semester, and I'm like the only one with a middle initial. And it wasn't like there was other Jason, like there was no need for it. She's like, no, I just like it. It sounds cool. So she put the T in there. And ever since then, when I'm doing something, you know, like on the art side of things, that kind of pops up in the back of my head that it, you know, oh, I need to put the T back in there.
That's funny. I kind of always done the same thing with my M. But yeah. Well, hey, we're talking tonight about the WonderCon and the Emerald City in reverse, because those two shows are nearly back-to-back.
Back-to-back, doubleheader week.
So it really started off with some pain. You know, the con season does for these two serious shows. I mean, these are both, in perspective, these are both shows that are, I don't remember what WonderCon is. Is that a 60,000 person show? Something like that.
Do some
I think it's
research.
Yeah, I think it was around 60,000 last year. And then, of course, and then the Emerald City, which is around 72 or 73,000, I think is where it tops out at, something like that.
Yeah, last year they're saying 2014 was about 60,000.
Okay.
So that's not bad. They've expanded the floor, but that's the second show that we're looking at. That'll be the first weekend in April. But before we get to there, the previous weekend prior to WonderCon, we will be up at Emerald City Comic Con in Seattle.
Indeed.
Let's see what the numbers are on that one. So Emerald City, like we've if you've watched the show before, we've talked about this a number of times. Emerald City is one of our favorite shows of the year, and it's a great way to kind of to. I mean, you've done a couple shows already. I know a couple of the other people, some of our friends have had, you know, small shows. I didn't do any small shows at the beginning of the year, but in years past, we'd have a show in January or a show in February. But Emerald City is kind of like the big punch. Like, this is one that we travel for. It's a great show. You know, we have a lot of fun at Emerald City, and it's Seattle, which is a town I love.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the thing about it is that sort of rises it above most of the other shows is the fandom there is really awesome. Like, it's really mature. It's really art centric. And, you know, I think there are a lot of patrons of the arts with those folks. And so I think that's another thing that really makes it pretty great.
Yeah, that's the most surprising thing, I think, that that we feel, because every show has its own kind of, its own personality, its own vibe going on, right? And, and with Emerald City, it is definitely it has a real, the personality is definitely in the creator, the independent creator, the web comics, They like to see stuff that's new and original. I mean, there's a lot of really cool stuff that we see that you don't see everywhere else. Like it doesn't feel like it's overrun with mass media, even though there's a lot of shows that come there because it is close to Canada. So a lot of shows that shoot above the border will exhibit there. We'll see Arrow there. You'll see a lot of celebrities that'll go there, but the vibe on the floor is a lot more independent, a lot more creative, as far as like what people are interested in. Like it just doesn't feel like it has like some shows you're like, oh, this is a Star Wars kind of show. Like the crowd here really is into Star Wars, or the crowd here is really into Marvel, or it's really into DC. And Emerald City has always kind of struck me as everybody's into something like something underground, something, left of center. And I love that about it.
Yeah, when you walk the floor there, you're going to run into like, oh, this guy does nothing but laser etches skateboard decks with beautiful illustrations, or a craftsperson that makes this or that, and way less of just the fan art scene. Which again, nothing against it, but I love walking Emerald for that. Checking out new stuff, and I guess it does kind of flourish there. But that kind of goes back to the, like the 60s in Seattle with the music scene and the garage rock scene and stuff. And so I think that indie spirit is big in the Northwest. So
yeah,
it's exciting.
It's definitely a culture of the area. This is not necessarily something that's unique just to this Comic-Con. I think it says more about Seattle in general. And that's one of the really cool things about doing these shows around the country is that you kind of get a chance to see what the flavor, the vibe is of that area. It's a really interesting way to get a sampling because, when you're sitting in your booth, all these different people, and they're all different kinds of walks. They're all different, they're from different neighborhoods and different communities around the area. But it's really interesting to kind of give you this just sort of an overview of what that section of the country's like.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we for us, it's a real challenging show because we drive a big Vanitar around the country, and that's hauled with, it has thousands of pounds of gear. And so for Emerald, we've got to ship it up there. And we have a display in storage, a bunch of product in storage, clear bags in storage, all this junk. But it turns into a real, something we've been working on for the last couple months of making sure we have everything we need up there. And we even have a crony that's, receiving our stuff. And we've got some locals that are helping us run the show. So anyway, it's pretty great. But it's kind of crazy. But I'm real thrilled about it. Other than I forgot to buy my plane ticket. I know. No, I did it. We got it covered. But one night I decided to book everything. Right? I'm like, I'm going to book all the hotels for this year, or most of them. And as we're doing that, I've got Emerald. I've got my flight right there, all picked out. And somehow we didn't do it. And in my mind, I did it. So easy rookie mistake, but we got it figured out ahead of time, which is the real deal. Because had we shown up at the airport with no tickets, I would be punching the air quite a bit. So anyway, don't do that.
Yeah, we're driving for the first time this year, so
I'm jealous.
Yeah, we're gonna drive up. It's really interesting. I find even though we're driving over the course of 3 days. Really, because we'll be driving the 2 days prior to load in, and we'll be driving half the day before we load in. I am less stressed about it, partly because nothing leaves my hands. Like I don't have to worry about whether something's shipping or what, then start having those nightmares of what happens if they lose it, what happens if, so being able to just, see everything here in my studio and pile it up over the course of the week and that takes a lot of stress out of it. I know where everything is for those 2.5 days that I'm driving prior to it. And we're visiting friends on the way. We're crashing with friends on the first night. So we get to visit some people, and that's cool. And Maya and I have a great time on these long haul drives. So really looking forward to that. The challenging part is, and that's actually what pushed us over the decision for doing the drive, is the return getting to WonderCon. So if I were to ship my booth to Seattle and then want to use that same booth in Anaheim the following weekend, odds are my booth would show up the day after load-in for Anaheim.
Which is ideal.
Yeah, so we realized, like, when we were kind of toying with the idea of driving to Seattle, before I looked at the calendar and realized, either I build a second booth or we drive it both ways. And so we'll be driving back down, and we'll be driving on my birthday, and then next day we will get home and then sleep in our bed for one night and then load in Anaheim. But the big upside for us in Anaheim is a local show, so I'll be back home every night. So it's not really 2 shows in a row like we did last year, in the sense that we're going from hotel to hotel. Every night I'll be able to come home and keep an eye on my animals and at least sleep in my own bed.
Yeah, that's nice. Yeah, the drive into a show is just dramatically easier. If we had to do a show tomorrow, we could do a show tomorrow. We just could. We could load our stuff up and we'd be ready to go. Just takes the time to pack it. But Seattle is like, well, here's an example. We did our first show. I'm going to go on a little thing here. We did our first show last weekend, which is the Tucson Festival of Books, and we used the iPad. And I have a battery. I have a battery and an inverter, and that's what I use to power stuff when we need to. Well, I can't take that to Seattle, so I had to buy a battery pack and ship it up there and all that, just so we have, because I had to test to see how long an iPad will run on battery and sans battery. So it's about 4.5 hours running square before it dies. So maybe 5 hours, not enough. So anyway, so yeah, it's crazy. It requires way more planning. And next year, our plan is to do the same. I'd really like to drive to Seattle if we can next year. We'll have to see how the schedule. Oh, I saw the dates for that, by the way. Emerald's dates are moving kind of dramatically.
Really?
Did you know that? I'll look it up for you. I will look it up. It's what, the Washington.
Oh, the convention center had it?
Yeah, they did. So I'll look it up here real quick if you talk.
Yeah. So one of the things, if you haven't dealt with this exhibiting, is every show. I mean, it'd be great if all of the conventions got together and shared a calendar, but they don't. So last year, I booked 2 or 3 back-to-back shows. I think I had 3, and one of them was 2 out-of-state back-to-back shows. So we were actually 2 of them were, but one was a flying show. So we actually flew out to Gen Con, drove to Chicago, did a Wizard World there, and then flew back from there. And after that show, I still had another double, weekends show, and I decided I don't want to do 2 shows in a row anymore. It's just not realistic. It's too draining. If one is a great show and the other one's not a great show, the reality is at that point I can drop the not a great show. And I said all of this without looking at my calendar. And the issue is Emerald City kind of had its schedule laid out, and WonderCon follows Easter, which is, of course, the first Sunday after the first full moon after the spring equinox, which can change drastically year to year. So WonderCon kind of jumps around in the spring, and it just butted up against Emerald City this year and forced me into a decision of I'm still doing back-to-back shows.
So get this, 2016, it's April 8th through the 10th.
Whoa.
I know. So I don't know. I have to look and see how that impacts other things, but that's a pretty big move.
I might have to build a second booth by then.
Yeah.
Because we're doing Emeralds, or not Emerald, we're doing C2E2, which is Chicago in April, but we have to ship the booth. And of course, that's 2 weeks to play it safe, to know where your booth is. You have to kind of block that out. So the booth is shipping on the 15th, even though that's not the weekend of the show. So it's one of those things where you kind of have to pay attention to that stuff. If you are doing big travel shows, where does it land? It's going to be after WonderCon next year.
Do we have the WonderCon dates for next year?
Well, Easter is March 27th. So Easter moves forward a week. And
wow.
We'll be doing WonderCon and then driving up to Seattle next year.
So I guess mine would be, WonderCon, Emerald City, and then possibly our LA Times Festival of Books. And it kind of flip-flops everything.
Yeah, that's something. That's definitely something to keep an eye on, because eventually, with these things moving around, eventually we have to face the idea that, these things will slam into each other.
They're gonna, because the thing is, these shows are getting so big that they can't really worry about other people.
No, and it's one of those things where you have to realize that their needs are not necessarily the same as the vendors' needs or the exhibitors' needs or the the talents' needs. Like, it's one of those things where there's a show somewhere every weekend. So if you're going to start a show, it's like throwing a party in October for Halloween. Guarantee one of your friends is also throwing a party on that same day. But at some point, you just have to decide you're throwing a party. So yeah, it's not. Yeah, and it's one of those things where they reward loyalty. So there's obviously a benefit to always going to the show. And I've had conflicts. I've had shows come up that directly conflict with another show and have to make a decision between the shows. And sometimes there's no going back after that.
Indeed. Let's talk a little bit about WonderCon. We haven't really covered that one too much. So WonderCon, again, the history is it was a North California show up in San Francisco, and I think it wasn't. I don't think it even started in San Francisco. It started in San Jose or some. I don't know. I make up stuff when I don't know. But anyway, it started years ago, and then moved to San Francisco. Was there for a real long time, and then finally it's moved down to Anaheim until they can try to reboot the show up north. So anyway, at first it was kind of a painful transition for us. It was, we'd done the San Francisco show a number of times, like, I don't know, 5-6 times, and then they moved. And that at first hurt, but it's rebounded, and for us it's a better show than it was up north. But of course we're bigger now and all that. But anyway, it's a good show as well.
Yeah, it's definitely it's interesting because it has a different vibe to it. We talk about Emerald City's vibe all the time, and WonderCon has it's not as media centric as San Diego is. It's like they're not necessarily premiering thousands of new movie trailers and have all the biggest panels of celebrity acts and all that kind of stuff, but they do. And the crowd it draws is a lot of industry people, a lot of entertainment industry people, just based on its location. So it has this strange, like, industry convention. Like, it's almost like a trade show at times. So it's a great, like, networking kind of thing. Like, you feel, I don't know, it's interesting. It's not like fun like a small independent Comic-Con is, where you're just running around the aisles and hanging out with other artists. It definitely has more of, put on your game face when you're working this weekend.
Yeah, it's definitely more pro show in that way, I guess. I mean, it does, the vendors are typically a little bigger than maybe a normal Comic-Con, like, more slick, I guess.
Yeah.
We talk to more producers there than we talk to animation producers in 2 cities, and that's San Diego and then Anaheim at WonderCon, which is exactly the reason you're saying.
Yeah, and it's not surprising. It's the same company, so it's not surprising that they have the same industry connections.
No,
and they promote that. They have, like, if you're in the industry, it's easier to get tickets. They have a definite, obvious relationship with the entertainment industry.
Yeah, it's a well-run show. I will say that, though. The Comic-Con International, those guys run a really tight show. Again, things I look for are delivering on what you promise, right? So if they tell you you're going to have 2 tables and 4 chairs and a garbage can, you're going to have those things, absolutely. Your placement isn't going to get squirrely. Like, I've never had a placement that wasn't what they said it was going to be, and that's super valuable. Also, I love their load-in.
Load-in is brilliant there. It is surprising. Anaheim Convention Center does a lot of very big shows, and a lot of times a very big convention center doesn't necessarily have the best load-in. This place is smooth. It is really smooth. Part of it is the physical design of the building, which I find to be really humorous, because when you do load-in, you're going through the back of the facilities, and the back of the facilities seems like it was built like 30 years before the front was. I mean, they've obviously remodeled, but it is a trip to drive up the back of the Anaheim Convention Center if you've gone through the front of the Anaheim Convention Center, because the back has never been remodeled.
No, it's basically Blade Runner with less rain.
Yeah.
I don't know.
But it's nice and flat. It's open, like every hall is. You're not going over bridges. You're not, they have a few small parking structures in the back to be able to park. They're great at dealing with all levels of exhibitor, which is really important, because you'll have shows where it's really easy to walk stuff in, and then you'll have shows where it's really easy to drive stuff in, but it's rare to get a show where it's easy to do both. And Anaheim is one of those shows where it's like I could drive over here and wait in line to get one of the front parking spaces and then dump everything out of my car. But at the same time, I can go park in the back parking structure and walk an extra 100 feet, 100 yards, and load my stuff in by hand. And so it's I like that. I like those kind of shows where you can just kind of pull off to the side and unload and not have to wait for the sweet spot where they're going to help you. Because we do some shows where you can sit in line, a huge line of cars in an underground driveway. You can't see where you're going. You can't see the front. You have no idea how many cars are in front of you or what's taking up the time, because there's no visibility, because they're in the catacombs. And that's a scenario that's great until you're dealing with a couple hundred independent exhibitors. Where it's just a line of cars and you have no idea what the wait is going to be, or, who's in front of you. So Anaheim definitely is just wide open. You can see everything when you pull in, and you know exactly what you're dealing with.
Yeah. The hall's kind of it feels like a little bit of an older hall. It's not ancient by any stretch of the imagination, but it is kind of, I don't know, is it an 80s sort of hall? I don't know.
I think it predates that if you look at the architecture on the back end.
Yeah.
The lobby has been redesigned, and you'll be shocked when you see it this year. Every year they've done more and more work to the area in front of the convention center. So more of it, yeah. They kind of cut it off and redesigned it between the hotels across from the convention center a year or two ago. But it's really interesting. Like, they have it set up now where they can have huge outdoor events. So we were there for NAMM in January for the big music industry show, just as a guest, and they had a huge stage up there, and they had food trucks, and so it'll be interesting to see if WonderCon does that. So they gotten rid of the big drive loop that used to go in front of the convention.
Oh, really?
Center. Yeah,
okay.
It's gone now, and they can put in big food trucks in the court, or they can have a stage out there. So there's a lot. I don't think WonderCon will be doing something that large, but the convention center has the ability to go that big, and it's really interesting.
Yeah, the convention center, lends a lot of the vibe to the show. I think the feel of the whole thing. If it's dimly lit and is kind of crappy, then it feels crappy, and if it's a nice place, it can feel really nice too. What is interesting about Anaheim though is that, how we're starting to see that outreach in the community of the show overflowing, like in Emerald City or even now Phoenix. There's starting to be lots of, events that are happening around town. But WonderCon doesn't really have anything like that I know of. I mean, I'm sure there are other tertiary events, but I don't know that since it isn't exactly a local show for the people that run it, it doesn't sort of have the homegrown stuff.
Part of it. I also think that because the Anaheim Convention Center has so much facility, they're not short on rooms. You don't have to spill out to a theater space outside of the convention hall, because they have plenty of large meeting rooms. I mean, it's 3 stories tall. They have massive conference rooms on the 2nd floor, and then they have a 3rd floor. So there's plenty of space for panels. There's plenty of space for performances or readings or podcasts. So I think that's part of it. Like, there's no need for an after hours party. There's some after hours events that are going on in the convention center at WonderCon. Nerdist is having their podcast panel is going to like 10 p.m.
Wow.
And they're having a bunch of stuff put in, that are happening on site. So you have your badge, you just go in there. So you don't have to spill out to a restaurant. The other problem is locally, you're right across the street from Disneyland. So anything there is going to be, it'll be challenging in the sense that all the hotels there will be having, are going to be full with guests that are, staying there for Disneyland so I'm sure it's a little bit more complicated. You have to go farther to get to an independent restaurant. I don't know of a lot of restaurants with cabaret license, within walking distance like you see in Seattle. So I think it's the nature that it is a thoroughly commercialized neighborhood.
Yeah, absolutely. But that does change. That does change the vibe of it, though. Even so, if it's internal, that kind of, I think that stuff that goes offsite sort of breeds this, oh, what's going on here, and even though those people won't necessarily come to the show that are seeing this, but it does let you know something's going on, and they kind of get used to the idea of what a Comic-Con is and all that. So yeah, it's interesting.
It creates an environment. And I think that's one of the things that one of my complaints about some of the cities, like downtown Los Angeles, I have a real problem with, is that it doesn't have the infrastructure necessary to create that kind of atmosphere. They have a Ritz-Carlton across the street from the convention center, but Ritz-Carlton's not going to be having the cosplay prom. It's one of those things where it's like they don't have a group of hotels that are going to be participating in the convention like you see in Phoenix or you see in Seattle. And I think that has a huge impact on it. And I do think that's part of what creates that professional trade show kind of tone that we see at WonderCon, is that it's not grassroots. You don't have the ability to be grassroots, because if you're doing something grassroots, you are miles away from the convention hall. Whereas in San Diego, you can take over a bar, in the Gaslamp district. And you're still within the range because they kind of spill out all over the place in San Diego.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting because that, WonderCon is, I think it's over 25 years old. I don't know for certain.
Yeah, what do we got here? I have a quick history. So 15 years.
Oh, it's only 15 years old?
Yeah, according to Wikipedia, 2001.
What? No.
Oh no, I'm sorry. I read that wrong. It was operating for 15 years prior to that, and then in 2001 is when it became part of San Diego Comic-Con International.
Okay.
So yeah, we're longer than that. Oh, they even have and they've done major previews for some big movies there. That's one thing that San Diego, it's interesting. San Diego's known for being the place where they tease movies, but they kind of have to tease movies a year out from San Diego, because San Diego's late in the season for releasing movies. For, the big tentpole movies. So WonderCon is kind of a sweet spot for them. I think that was one of their reasons for kind of moving it into Orange County to get it closer to Hollywood. And at the time of year, so they've debuted or previewed Batman Begins there, and Watchmen 300 and Kick-Ass. And so you'll see a lot of summer blockbusters being kind of promoted there. We were looking at the map before we started the show tonight, and Warner Brothers has a massive footprint on the floor. We don't know what's going to be in that space. So it could be, any of their products, but I definitely expect to see a number of movies, and we've seen it in the past where a number of movies have had set pieces or props on display, and 20th Century Fox is going to have a big booth there. And, so I definitely expect to see some premiere stuff happening at WonderCon.
Yeah. So another fun fact, WonderCon was our very first show we ever did in 2006. So it's our very first show of any kind.
WonderCon was not our first Comic-Con, but I think it might have been our second or third Comic-Con, but our first big show. Not our really first. Well, I'm pretty sure that Phoenix hit right around the same time too for us. But we did a couple small shows, and we had been doing our Tiki events for a long time before we started doing Comic-Cons. But yeah, so it's it's one of those shows where you're like, it at the time was expensive, for my perspective, because I didn't know, what cons cost.
Sure.
But it was local, and it was a chance to kind of, see what the pros are doing. So, and it's been a good show for us. But like I said before, it's a good show, but it always feels like work. Like I'm tired at the end of it.
Sure.
I'm working. Whereas like Seattle, I don't know. There's something I love about Seattle, and part of it is after I finish WonderCon, then I get to look forward to a commute home because I'm driving home. I'm not like walking across the street and hanging out at a hotel. So
Yeah.
like, so there's psychologically a different vibe for me doing local shows, and I kind of prefer to do shows away from home.
Yeah, it's odd. When we do Phoenix, it's no less exhausting. No less exhausting after every day, even though it's exciting. It's still like I'm dead every day.
Well, when you think about it, at Phoenix, when the show ends, we pack up our booths. I walk, a block or two and get dinner, and then drag myself to a hotel room, and I'm probably done by the time you guys get home.
It's true, yeah.
And it's not that you're that far away. It's just if you have to get in the car and then drive for 15, 20 minutes, and then get organized, and then you got to make yourself dinner, and there's definitely a benefit to just kind of staying across the street at the hotel.
Indeed. So yeah, WonderCon, excited about it. What's your booth number? Do you have a booth number for that there, WonderCon? I bet you do.
For WonderCon, well, let's pull this up. I am. What am I at? WonderCon 1406. Is it? I can't remember.
It was a good year.
Yeah, I think I'm 1406. Yeah, that's about right. So, and then we've got Emerald City is 115, I want to say. Yeah, 115 at Emerald City.
You got the low number.
Yeah. Well, Emerald City is an interesting floor map on Emerald City because the way the convention center is built, the halls don't touch each other. There's a sky bridge that goes between them that goes over the street. And they use the sky bridge. Some of the larger vendors are on the sky bridge, and that kind of connects the two halls. And we're in what a lot of us will refer to as the front hall, since that's where the entrance is and where Artist Alley is. So I'm in a new location, but still kind of I'm like halfway between where I was 2 years ago and where I was last year.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I'm really looking forward to that.
I heard, and I could be wrong because I have not looked in depth at it, but I think somebody was saying something about a whole nother floor, yet another floor, not the one that's down below, but yet another floor with some vendors in it. So I don't know what that is. I know they had some vendors with the gaming. If you're a gamer,
yeah, they announced that there's one whole area on their convention center that'll be dedicated to like gaming. I remember because there's a second floor, the back hall, for lack of a better term, the 1000 hall is on that block. It has multiple levels, so they have the ability to go down a few floors back down to street level. So at Seattle's convention center, we're up on like the fourth or fifth floor.
Yeah, we're on the fourth floor.
On the fourth floor. So yeah, but on the side that we're on, the front hall, the first floor is not. It's street level, but it's not really. It's like just big, massive entranceway. There's not a lot going on there. There's some retailers down there, like the FedEx office, and things like that. So there's fewer levels of convention hall. There's like just the one up on our level, because it's kind of built into a hill, and then the other tower across the street is a stack, so they can keep going down a couple levels of smaller conference rooms.
Yeah, there's a lower level on Hall H that has a exhibiting hall for kids, which looks like it has 12 booths, 12 10x10s. Remember, there was the other area that was down below where Zoms was last year. But I'm trying to find that. I think that might be the level 3. I don't know. No, that's not it. Anyway, there was some other
3. I didn't.
That's gaming.
Yeah, there's a gaming level, and they had kind of like a podcast level down there. I don't know if that's still the case.
I'm looking at it here. There's a bunch of gaming and exhibitors. So there are exhibitors there on level 2, which is the gaming area.
Okay.
Level 3 is break room stuff. Anyway, but there was a whole nother area that some folks were stuck on that were first time vendors that I went down there and it felt fairly grim, only because it's not the main floor, right?
Yeah, well, it depends. Because I remember, I don't know if it was last year or the year before. I remember a bunch of podcasts were on one of those lower levels, but yeah, and some large name podcasts were down there. So there's potential for a lot of draw and traffic depending on what you're doing. That could be beneficial or not. Depending on what you're exhibiting. I mean, 2 years ago we were on the Skyway. We were a small booth on the Skyway. Which was great. It guaranteed everybody was going to walk past the booth, but at the same time, a lot of people walked past the booth because they were, the traffic flow was so high. It was like being on a raging river or setting up your cafe on the side of a freeway. You get a lot of traffic drive by, but not a lot of people being capable of stopping. So, there's a sweet spot to traffic. Too much traffic can be just as damaging as too little traffic.
Yes.
We've done a couple shows like that where the organizers like, oh, I mean, you must have had a fantastic location because we set a stage up at the end of your aisle and that must have been fantastic. And we're like, no, it kind of sucked because they basically, once a show, somebody was going to be on at top of the hour, they all just come rushing past and there was just a massive wall of people. So if somebody was shopping, they were pushed away, and most of them weren't shopping. They were racing to go, get somebody's signature at the stage.
Yeah. For us, San Diego is a place where that happens, where everything's great, but once it reaches a certain density, people stop shopping, and now they're just stressed and kind of trying to move, and that changes the whole dynamic. Their faces look more like cattle a little bit.
And that's that's where the attendance numbers can play against you. So I'm always a little cautious. Like I don't rate a show based on its attendance numbers. We're doing 70,000, I think was last year at Seattle, and 64 at WonderCon. But it also depends on how much can the actual physical room handle. I mean, we've both done shows where there were, a huge crowd, but bad for everybody involved. Yeah. So, it's interesting to see. In Seattle, Emerald City is sold out.
And Emerald City
sold it out.
It's also topped out. Like they're at capacity. There's no more. Yeah, they're not going to grow year to year anymore unless they add on floor space somewhere in some other hall or something. So and I suspect that they will move stuff around.
Possibly move stuff off site because there are hotels like across the street that probably have some spaces. So non-essential stuff, they might move panels around to make up space. So it's one of those things where they can do a little bit but not big things, although Emerald City does spill out into Seattle itself. They do a lot. There's a lot of theaters in Seattle. A lot of theaters are doing special shows. A lot of people from out of state, a lot of artists and entertainers from out of state will come in and do shows in Seattle for the weekend. So there's the vibe continues out into the city. So it's not just for pass holders, which is good. I think that's a very healthy thing for a show to have.
Yeah, totally agreed. We're going to be seeing that, I think, more and more as these shows are at these numbers. Phoenix Comic Con is at 77,000 or something like that, and it is. We're going to grow this year, I think, with attendance, but it's not far from getting capped. In the next couple of years.
Yeah, I think they're very close, and it's interesting because it wasn't long ago, like 2 years ago, that you could walk around downtown Phoenix and there was nothing. Like the restaurants wanted nothing to do with the convention. Most of the restaurants didn't realize, there's a convention in town. Like they had no idea. Just last year, we overwhelmed a couple restaurants that finally had like Phoenix, late night kind of stuff because everything seemed to shut down by 6 o'clock.
Right.
And the few restaurants that like the Qdoba, that kind of place, pizza parlors and stuff, have kind of moved into the downtown proper, which is nice. But they were completely unawares that that they were going to be getting obscene number of people in costumes, wanting pizza. So it'll be interesting to see how they deal with it this year, because I think the awareness of the city has finally caught up to the event. And that's cool.
Yeah, that's another great thing about these shows that are really tent poles for the community, the geek community, because the Facebook page for Phoenix Comic Con is completely active year round. it doesn't ever just die off. Like they're always, there's communities, there's sub communities that are talking all the time, and I think that's great for the health of it all.
And we're seeing that more and more, and I think that's fantastic. I love the idea that these things are, these shows are growing to the point where they're part of the community, and not just something. I mean, I live near a convention center, and I never know what's going on. I'll walk past it and go, I wonder what show's here now, and I'm completely unaware of what shows are coming into town. So it's nice to see these shows starting to catch people aware, and you'll see it in Seattle. Walking around the streets, that your badge will get you a discount at the store, and it's a store that has nothing to do with geek culture, Comic Cons, or anything. It's just it's a store that's aware that a convention's coming to town, and that's fantastic. I think it's really great for the experience, and it creates the pull to bring people in from outside of the area. Like I love Emerald City because I'm not just meeting people who live in Seattle. You're meeting people from all over the area, and that's great. I'm driving a couple days to get there, and I guarantee there are guests that are driving a couple days just to go to the show. And that's what's really cool.
Those are absolutely the best shows that are drawing folks from a whole wide region for sure. Yeah, so I totally agree. What else about these shows? Do we cover these shows well enough here?
Well, let's talk about the whole issue of doing a double header.
Okay.
So you're flying to Seattle, flying home to Arizona, and then driving to Anaheim?
Yeah.
So what's your schedule look like? What day do you get back on?
Monday.
You'll be back on Monday. And what day are you driving? When do you start driving out?
Wednesday.
So you'll have Tuesday.
Yes. So so it's kind of kooky. So all the products are ordered. All the products are ready to go. They're bagged and signed and ready to go for those shows. For Emerald, for Emerald and for WonderCon. Here's an example. We have 8x10 prints, right? Mm-hmm. Well, we'll sell out of, we're nearly sell out of many of them. So we just can't. We could scramble to restock it, but instead we have it takes 3 bins to do the whole set. We have 9 bins that are 3 sets ready to go. So we basically get home, hot swap, whole new set, so it's fresh. So anyway, so that's the deal. There's no time for us to restock, and we know that because we've been planning. So that's the deal. I think it's do some laundry, try to get some sleep, and then get some food and get on the road again. So anymore, it's funny, is that trip used to be long to us. Wow, we're like 6 hours, and now we're like, 6 hours, that's like a commute. That's like we're just driving to work. So it's not a big deal at all now. Now that we're doing like 18-hour places. So not so bad. So it's pretty fun. We enjoy it. I'm trying to get us some books on tape to listen to. I've got a couple, so try to keep us entertained on the trip. So but it's mostly
give you a huge list of things to listen to on a drive.
Yeah. Awesome.
For us, we're going to hit the road for Seattle on this Tuesday. Will be the start. Our first day is only about 5-6 hours of driving to get to our friends in Central California. And then we'll spend a full day driving and probably get to Oregon. And then half day drive into Seattle and load in on the same day. So basically wake up early, get in the car, drive for 4 or 5 hours, and then do load in and check into our hotel and all that jazz. And then the next day is the first day of Emerald City. Monday we will jump back in the car, start the drive south. So we will get home Wednesday and Thursday's load in. Is that right?
Yes.
I think that's
you
right.
Can also sit. I think you can also, maybe
Wednesday.
Just Thursday. Wednesday, I think it is, starts. I think.
Yeah.
I
could drive and do load in Wednesday evening if I wanted to.
Yeah, we're coming a day early this time for Emerald. We've never done it before, but we're coming in on Wednesday. and we're going to start setting up on Wednesday, and then finish setting up on Thursday. And if we get some time then we're actually going to maybe try to actually look through a window or something and see the city. So that'd be kind of nice to have a little bit of time to have fun.
Yeah, that's something that I always try to set aside. We have family in Seattle, so in the past we've stayed an extra day to visit family. We won't really have that kind of freedom this time because we are in a time crunch and we have driving to do. But so it'll be a rough turnaround for us, and we're doing the same thing. I spent the last month prepping for doubling up my production runs and prepping more styles and have more styles and have styles that aren't going to be at Emerald City that are ready to go in. If something sells out at Emerald City, I have a different design that's ready to swap in for it into the shelves so that we have it for WonderCon. So yeah, you have to plan in advance. And the only way to really plan in advance is you just basically treat it like you're starting 2 full shows at the same time.
Yeah, but it has a lot of benefits. I mean, you just can't tag that stuff together last minute, or you'll be sitting in a booth in a city that you paid a lot of money to for not a lot of return.
So it's not like if I made too many of this one thing, oh God, I'm stuck with these. It's like, no, this just means I don't have to panic for, show number 3 or show number 4, having those things there. Because once the shows start and you start getting responses to new designs, what needs to be reordered or what needs to, increase production on something. And that's a lot easier when you have feedback. It's when you're starting. I'll be bringing like 5 or 6 designs that have never been to a show before. So I don't know. And most of like 2/3 of what I'm bringing has never been to Emerald City before. So the majority of my stuff, this is its first year at Emerald City. And like 20% of it, if not more, is new. Like I've only done it as a limited edition on the website and it's never been out in public. So I don't know what's going to respond and, what'll be hot.
I was just looking at some numbers for some perennial hits of ours that, we've sold for years, and we've just recently retired and redesigned a bunch of those things. But what's interesting is, even if you had X Fez at the show last year, doesn't mean you've reached, your sales capacity for that thing. Because, it's amazing how many times I'll pull out something that's old. Oh my gosh, it's brand new. It's wonderful. So,
yeah, for me, I tend to retire designs when I'm sick of them.
Right, absolutely.
There's designs where it's like, I know this is my hot seller. I don't want to make it anymore. And since, I'm making every single one of them, and I'm an artist, I want to make new, I want to create. I don't want to repeat. So a lot of our stuff, there's designs that I have in the past where it's like, I know people respond to that one. But I have to move on as an artist. And it's funny because, you're right. There are things. I finally retired one of our most popular designs after like 4 years.
Yeah.
And it wasn't because nobody was interested in it anymore. It was because I wanted to move on. And, there's other designs, but every show's different. Every year is different. You can kind of go in and go, well, I think I have a feeling for this audience here and bring something in. And you never know. And that's like I said earlier, that's one of the reasons why I love Emerald City is because their taste, like they're a little bit more excited about the weird stuff that I do, than as opposed to what I consider to be the mainstream stuff that I do. And I mean, they are, there's some of the stuff that is obvious, like it's directed towards a commercial, this is a popular theme kind of stuff. But I feel that Emerald City, there's a lot more people who are into the weird, which I love. I love the stuff that only appeals to 1%.
Right.
I don't want a design that everybody loves. I want a design that only a few people just totally get and really love it. I'm that kind of an artist that enjoys creating fringe, fringe concepts, and I get a lot of response like that to Emerald City. And which means that my sales at Emerald City are all over the place. There's not like, oh, this was a show that really likes skulls, or they're totally into pirates. It's a show that, you know, you just can't be terribly surprised by what people respond to, because it's everything, and it seems to be all of the weird bits.
Yeah, no, it's great. I think to do what we do, I think we're all kind of those, you know, we end up being fringe kind of people somehow, you know, and we attract those people too, you know, being that, you know, we're driven to do this, we're driven to make the kind of art we make, and we're usually not the normal people anyway. Hey, can I tell you guys my booth numbers of these here shows?
Yeah. Where are your booth numbers?
So I'm Emerald City, I'm 706, which is basically the same place I was last year, next to Monkey Minion and in that kind of artsy quadrant over there.
Yep.
And then WonderCon, we moved slightly in that we're facing the main 20 by 20 aisle, so we're facing the front of the floor. And that booth 719, I think we're next to Neil Adams. And
cool.
Boom's right there. It's been a real good spot for us. So we just kind of shifted forward. So anyway, same kind of places we've always been. So if you're looking for us,
yeah, we did our WonderCon pretty much, like I said, our Emerald City, we've moved. So if you're looking for me in Seattle, you know, we're in the front hall, but we're now over by where a lot of the webcomic guys are. We're on that end of that front hall, which is cool because there's a lot of people that I'm really excited to be near. So a lot of great artists are over there. And at WonderCon, kind of the same area that we've been in the last year or two, with a lot of the same people that we've been with. We're kind of tucked between Janelle at Badali Jewelry and Pendragon, which last year we were facing them. So we kind of spun around a little bit and shuffled. The three of us kind of shuffled around, but we're all still in that same intersection. So it'll be really interesting to see how that changes, because we moved kind of like across the aisle and over to the fatter aisle will come up like on our side. So it'll be interesting to see if we see any real difference in traffic or not at that show.
But you're in the front quadrant of the hall.
Yeah, we're up in front, which I like. I like the layout there. Because what they've done, and they did this a couple of years back, and I really like that they did this, is they kind of moved the big exhibitors, the big media companies, sort of put them towards the middle of the floor. So instead of being up front, which a lot of cons will put like the big exhibitors up in the front, which is really disruptive to flow, because when you come in and you have the big exhibitor, it kind of blocks off a bunch of walkways. So
yeah,
it does. Like flow around them, and it creates a lot of turbulence. So putting them in the middle where they can make noise, and they're kind of, you know, I'm okay with people walking past us to get to the big exhibitors, you know, at the start of a show. I don't have an issue with that. But that means that they're going to be coming walking past us as, you know, they go in and out. And that gives us good flow and good traffic. So, yeah, I do like being up in the front area, nice wide aisles near us, good visibility near us. And a lot of friends that are nearby, so I'm looking forward to that. I think it'll be a really good show.
You know, WonderCon, we're surrounded by Phoenix people, so there are Phoenix people all around us, which is kind of wild. So yeah, it's exciting. I'm excited to get started. We did our first show, which was Tucson Festival of Books, which, you know, is a good 120,000 attendees. 138,000 attendees.
Wow,
but
that's a good crowd.
Yeah, it is big, but it's a free show. It's outdoors, so that's painful. It was very windy, and so that was a huge challenge. The wind's just buffeting our product for the whole. I mean, you're outside in the weather for, you know, long days. It's exhausting, but it was good. It was solid, and we tried. Like anybody that takes this seriously, you know, in the off season, we're trying to develop and refine processes and booth designs and products, and trying to up your game all around. And so one of the things we're working on is Square. You know, Square, the processor for credit cards. We've been using it only to run credit cards. We don't use it for anything else. So for us, up till now, we were using it to do things like our product list would be things like 12 by 18 print, 8 by 10 print, 5 by 7 print, T-shirt this size. and it was pretty generic because we have, we have over 250 SKUs at this point, so a ton of SKUs, and so we would track all that on paper, which is a huge pain in the butt. I go home after the show, and we input it all into spreadsheets and all that. Boring stuff, I know, but here's the deal. So this year we decided, let's give Square a try. We have an iPad now. We built a register stand for one of our road cases, so it turns into a table that people can use for checkout. And anyway, we listed every product, and it worked, and we ran every transaction through it, cash included. So we have all the rich reporting that Square has on the back end. And anyway, it worked, and it was it wasn't risky, but it was a risk that I was worried about. It was something I was worried about if it would work or not, but it worked out pretty terrific. So anyway, if you've got less than a couple hundred products, definitely I would suggest using Square for that tracking, because the reporting's awesome. Because I could finally look and go, hey, how are we doing right now at the show? Like right now, I could put a button and see what our transaction level was. So that's exciting stuff, because I never know until the end of the day when I calculated all how we did for the show. So it's nice to have that stress buster, because you're in debt when you start a show, and so getting to that point where you're in the out of the red and in the black is really, for me, a stress point. Once I'm there, I really relax, because I'm like, oh, okay, good. Now we're finally starting to make some money.
Yeah, it's that's the only downside. Not doing a smaller show this year is not being able to kind of debug some of that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So I've done a few updates. It's kind of funny. There's two major projects that I did, and I had a couple other ones I was working on, but I just had to cut for time. But the two major projects that I did really have to do with load-in for me. So one of them is we have a cargo rack that we put on the back of the car. So I did some upgrades to that so that it'll make it faster for load-in. I added detachable wheels to the cargo rack, so it can just pull off the back of the car and drop onto the ground.
Oh, that's cool.
And that'll make things a lot easier, because as we're doing a long drive, I'll be able to take that inside, so I don't have to worry, freak out about somebody stealing my cargo off the cargo rack. And then I have my little hand cart that we use for moving, unloading the car, and I've turned it into a little display table. So once it's in the booth, it'll be part of the frontage of the booth and give me a place to sit and sketch. So and that was really the focus on this one. And I did some upgrades to the booth, decorative stuff to the booth already. So we're kind of in good shape for presentation wise. And I'm really excited that we get to do a full bore, bring our A game to Seattle. Since we're driving, I don't have to worry about cutting weight or holding things back because it doesn't fit.
Oh, it's so frustrating. So frustrating. Yeah, we have all our displays. None of them are able to come to Seattle.
It's rough, but that's something you have to deal with. You kind of have to play that game and know, when you can handle, what you can do at what show. And there's always going to be, as you grow, there's always going to be shows where you have to do the show as a small vendor. You can't do it as a big show. We were lucky going up until we saw the map for Seattle. We thought we were going to be still stuck in our original 10-foot inline that we had in the past. And when we had asked if we could be moved up to a corner, which is why we're in a different location on the floor. If we could be moved up to a corner, and it looked like it wasn't going to happen until they released the map and they found us a spot. So it was a really last minute thing, which was very helpful in the sense that I could then just focus on laying out my booth and using that same booth layout for both Emerald City and for WonderCon, and not have to worry about coming back and shifting gears in one day and then loading in, and deciding. So I kind of going in, I was like, oh God, that I'm really excited for Emerald City, but I'm not going to have as much space, so I can't bring as much product. Having the corner, having my standard corner is great, but we're going to start, working towards getting, bigger space. We're outgrowing our corner. I like that I can do a show in a small space and have it packed to the gills, but it's limiting. So, But so for travel shows, like we are doing a couple flying shows, we will have to ship. So I have to make sure I have it set up and kind of have to look at things and decide what's more important. Where can I cut things that aren't as essential for shipping. So it's one of those things where it's a constant challenge. We already have 2 flying shows booked, and we are applying for a 3rd flying show. And the scary, like we said, the scary thing is the shipping. Shipping your booth out there. That booth is gone for 3-4 weeks, depending on how far because you gotta make sure it ships early enough that if something goes wrong, it has plenty of time to be there. So a week and a half prior to the event is kind of important. And then, you don't know how long it's going to take to get back. And, so it's one of those things where that gets a little bit frightening.
I think you bring up a great point too, is that as we're growing, there's years that are transitional years where you can't, like, for example, we do 10 by 20s now in a fair number of shows, about half. I would love to do a 10 by 20 in Seattle, but it's not available. Like it's going to be hard for us to grow to a 10 by 20 in Seattle.
You mean 10 by 20 or 20 by 20?
Sorry, 20 by 20, because the space just is not going to be available. There's a waiting list. So now I kind of have to go halfway. So I have to build a booth that works for a 10 by 20, and I have to build a booth that works for 20 by 20, and I have to do a booth that works at an outdoor book fest. And, so it's funky. I want to do all the same. I want the same footprint everywhere.
Ideally, so I designed my booth to handle a 10-foot inline or a corner. And that's really gotten me through, like really helped me get through the shows we've done. And we've done shows where we had a 10 by 20. So it's like the way my booth is designed, it does great in a 10-foot inline. It does great, which is way too small for me now. And it does great in a corner. But when you put me up by 10 by 20, it's still only half a booth. So it's either I have to build a whole second booth or I have to kind of redesign how I treat a 10 by 20 and address, other issues. So I still have to kind of like recreate. I haven't solved a 10 by 20, but that is definitely the direction that we're going in, for shows, is that we're kind of outgrowing our 10 by 10 corner. Because there's stuff, there's stuff, projects I have in the pipeline that I don't know how they would fit in the booth, because I'm already maxing out my booth now with just our, Fez designs, let alone anything, any other accessories that I start making. So, we're still in that transition period now. And it's scary when you're booking a show for the first time to commit to a massive floor space when you don't know what the audience is like. You don't know what kind of response you're going to get. And if it's a really great show, it's really difficult to expand your booth because you're not the only one that's having a great show there.
Yeah, and that's the thing, is these great shows, they're locking up. At Phoenix Comic-Con, we got our 20 by 20 kind of early. It's been a couple of years now, and I'm really glad we did, because if we wanted it today, we'd have a hard time getting it. Yeah. With the 300 booth waiting list or whatever. So yeah, it is tough. It's a wacky thing. San Diego's a great example. I'm so lucky to have an end cap. Lucky as heck to have a double end cap. I'll never have a 4-island booth there. Never. Yeah.
That's how it is at Gen Con, when we were talking to them after we did our first year in the Entrepreneurs Alley, which is a section that's set aside for, year one exhibitors. When we went out into the general pool, it was one of those things where it's like we could book a 10 by 20 and be committed to a 10 by 20. And it would have been a lot easier to get a 10 by 20, on that first year than it is to get a good corner spot and then try to get the spot next to you. But at the same time, we have to ship to that show. So I don't necessarily want to bring more furniture, more booth to that show. So it's one of those things where it's like on the travel shows, because I won't necessarily have a crew of people to work with me. That's the scary thing. When you're doing a really big, busy show and you have a lot of frontage, you have to kind of pay attention to a lot more, and you need more people, keeping an eye on that frontage. So it's like, I know I can be by myself in a 10 by 10 corner at an average show. But if it's a busy show, I need a couple other people there with me. And that doubles if it's a busy show with a 10 by 20 or a busy show with a 20 by 20. You need, keep an eye on stuff and just to be able to help everybody that's walking up. It's not ideal to have 40 feet of frontage and one person and 4 people waiting. I can have 4 people waiting at a 10 by 10. I don't need a 20 by 20 to get 4 people waiting. So you don't want a line just standing there getting annoyed. You need to be able to process people. And that's always been one of my focuses. Like I've always was really concerned about the customer service aspect of it. And you see people, you'll see exhibitors on the floor that it's like an artist in front of a massive wall of prints and not engaging the audience and not being helpful or, not constantly, not making sure everybody is being, helped at the same time. So I've always kind of leaned more on make sure I have plenty of people helping me in the booth, even in a small booth, because I kind of plan for the busiest part. I don't plan for the slow part.
Right.
So that's always been kind of my fear. So as we move up, I feel like I need, 3 people in the corner booth is, that's a lot of people. And 4 is we're starting to get crowded, and it's a little bit hard to maneuver when you have 4 people behind there. But if I were to put that up to a 10 by 20 or even a 20-foot inline with no end caps, 3 people is a skeleton crew now. So, in my mind, that's how it feels like I'm not comfortable because, if you have 3 people, that means you can, somebody can run an errand and there's still 2 people in the booth. And you never know when that rush is going to hit.
Yeah, it's true. It's true.
Yep. So, we will be seeing each other in person in a week.
Yeah. It's crazy. I can't believe it's here. Emerald is a show that, you think about all year round, and it's always it's sort of a surprise when it's really here. It's an imaginary show until we get on that plane and get there. So yeah, I'm looking forward to it. It's day one is the stress one for me because it's do we make it there okay? Does our stuff make it okay? Is the stuff that we planned ahead with other people, do they follow through? Because we've got friends that are, bringing gear and meeting us here for other gear. And there's a lot of parts that all can fall apart on day one. So we got some good people though. So I think it'll be all right. But it'll be exciting. I'm able to take a deep breath once I see all the gear and we're in the hall and we have our table. So anyway,
that's why I'm excited. I'm driving.
Yeah, well, yeah, that's great. I am jealous. I won't lie.
Where Paige is flying in from Chicago, so I have my best booth worker going to be with us this weekend. So I'm really excited about that.
Awesome. Well, thank you for having us, and thanks for watching tonight. And please stop by Jason's Fezzarama booth, and feel free to stop by ours as well. And we look forward to seeing you guys.
Yeah, and I'll post a link to a map that has us as well as a bunch of our friends, a bunch of past guests on the show. So if you are going to Emerald City this week, or next week, I should say, and if you're going to WonderCon the weekend following, so the first weekend in April, I'll have that map posted as well with a number of past Booth Bastards guests on it. And this is going to be, we might be able to record something short and improv bit while we're on the road, but this will be our last full show of this month, and we probably won't be back until some point in April, because we're on the road for 2 weeks.
Indeed. So leave us a comment and let us know you're watching, and thanks for watching.
Yep. So Daniel, where do they find you on the interwebs?
So it turns out I haunt this place called steamcrow.com. So go there. If you like the Steamcrow Scouts, one of our fan groups, it's scouts.steamcrow.com, scouts.steamcrow.com.scum, and you can find us on social media under Steamcrow in any number of places. And how about you, Jason? Where are you on the internet?
Our website is, of course, fezzarama.com. You can find us You can find me on the Twitter and the Instagram as Fezmonger. That is my personal feed, and I will be posting to that throughout our trip and the 2 shows. And of course, we're on the Facebook and the Google Plus and all that kind of stuff. So you can leave us comments. You can reach us anywhere you want on all of that stuff. And like I said, we'll be back. Daniel and I will be back in a couple of weeks. We'll try to post random stuff as we're on the road, but we promise that almost every show, and it seldom happens because once we're on the floor, it gets a little bit crazy. So
things get real busy.
Yep. So thank you very much for tuning in. We will be back eventually. It might be a few weeks before that happens, and we'll have more interviews, more introductions to new artists, and more behind the scenes crap that we talk about in here as we go forward. If you have any requests, any suggestions, again, please leave them in the comments below. We will hear them eventually, and we'll see you next time.
No running.
No running.